All right, good afternoon. Good to see all these Liberty faces out in the crowd. We're here today to see if our legislature will allow a question to be put to the voters of New Hampshire. Should New Hampshire peaceably declare its independence from the U.S. federal government? Some believe that this is a laughable question. Do they fear the answer? Some believe that the question of independence has been settled. If so, then our state's sovereignty has been stolen. In my path to liberty, I have learned that our state was created by the people in 1784. Prior to forming our government, in Part 2 of our Constitution, the people reserved to themselves the rights of the people in Part 1. Our Constitution places the Bill of Rights, the rights of the people, above and before the establishment of our government. Part 1, Article 7 reads, "The people of the state have the sole and exclusive right of governing themselves as a free, sovereign, and independent state, and do, and forever hereafter shall, exercise and enjoy every power, jurisdiction, and right pertaining thereto, which is not or may not hereafter be by them expressly delegated to the United States of America in Congress assembled." The United States at the time was under the Articles of Confederation. In 1789, the first peaceful resolution in America disposed of the Articles of Confederation and formed a new government under our current U.S. Constitution. Remember, the people of our state reserve to themselves every power not expressly delegated. Disposing of our state's sovereignty was never allowed. For the federal government, now national government, to consider the state of New Hampshire to be nothing more than a local office for the District of Columbia is to destroy the independence of our great state. Now I'd like to introduce one of our state's best constitutional scholars living today, Daniel Richard.
Thank you, Mike. Everyone hear me all right? All right, I'll try to speak up. Thank you very much. My name is Daniel Richard, and I support this measure. I support this measure because we need to have this dialogue. Our form of government is broken, and our state and federal government is morally and financially bankrupt. The federal government has destroyed our republic and replaced it with a national central controlled democracy. Our founding fathers created a constitutional republic, not a democracy. When I see politicians get out there and talk about a democracy, they're telling you the truth. They've created democracy. Patrick Henry and George Mason refused to sign the Constitution because they feared the consolidating nature of the Constitution would lead to today. I mean, literally, Patrick Henry stood on the floor of the Virginia legislature and warned all the Virginians, we're not done here. This document is not done. Amending the Articles of Confederation and the Federalist attempt to obtain too much power has proven to be right. Thomas Jefferson believed that the laws should sunset every 20 years and allow the next generation to decide for themselves what form of government they wish to have. Think about it. Does anyone in this room think that your children are bound by the contracts you sign? No, I don't think so. And you know, the fact that the U.S. Constitution, after it was written, has been amended habitually since. We have 26 amendments to fix a broken Constitution. So I would argue that it was, I would not have signed it myself. Will I honor and obey the instrument while it stands? Yes, I will. Do I agree that it's righteous? No, it's broken. It's severely broken. The federal government was created to do four things, folks: wage war, negotiate peace, establish treaties with foreign governments for our common defense and international commerce, 4, to establish rules of commerce between the states, between the Indian tribes, between foreign countries. It's referred to as the Commerce Clause. And it was created to establish a medium of exchange and lawful money, gold and silver coin, to prevent fraud and inflation. What do we have today, folks? That's all they do is keep printing money, and that's why this is a serious measure that needs to be considered by the people of New Hampshire, because there is no money. Debt-based instruments called Federal Reserve notes are not lawful money. And show me the banking clause. Show me the banking clause where your state government has, or the federal government, has any authority to borrow money from a foreign bank and lend it and bribe the states. And that's what's been going on. Since 1933, the state has been bribed with debt instruments called Federal Reserve notes, and it's hijacked the state through the Commerce Clause. Folks, half of your state budget is predicated on federal money. The legislature assembles from January to June to do the people's business based on state taxes. Then they go home. The good little boys and girls go home, and guess who shows up next? The big boys. Who's that? No. Sununu and Company, the Executive Council, the governor. Where did they get that authority? It was a statute created in 1933. And the legislature gave the executive branch the ability of the legislature. It can't do that. It's called non-delegation doctrine. But it did. And so what do? This is what led to the arrest of the 9 people. They had no authority to assemble outside of our state house and do the business of the legislature and assume those powers and control. And that's exactly what they did. It needs to stop. I filed a lawsuit in Rockingham Superior Court to put an end to this fraud. The lawsuit makes the case that why the people should consider as to whether we should continue with this form of government. And I say no. Why should any of us be responsible for the trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars that have been spent? And they want you to pay for it. Here's the scam. In the statute that gives them the authority to borrow the money, and this is what I allege in our lawsuit, is they're signing your faith and credit. Where's your power of attorney? Did you give any member of your state government power of attorney to borrow money on your behalf? No, doesn't exist. So that's why I support this measure, and look, the power belongs to the people. It doesn't belong to the legislature. Let me share with you another dirty little thing that's been done to us. In the 80s, in 1980, they removed Article 99 of our state constitution that called for a convention to amend, alter, or strengthen our rule of law, our state constitution. They took it away. So now we have hat in hand, thank God for Representative Sylvia and those who are supporting him, to take this initiative, to let the people decide. It's not for the legislature to decide. They're your public servants. They're trustees of a trust indenture called the state constitution. So this lawsuit tomorrow, the state's going to have to answer. We have them in a little bit of a pickle. The state, in order to defend any public servant, has to determine whether the monies allocated are righteous. In other words, taxpayer dollars can't be used to defend public servants who violate their oath of office. So the Attorney General is tasked to make that decision. He has a problem. He's named in the lawsuit. If he's named in the lawsuit, you're supposed to go to the governor and the Executive Council. You can't go there either because they're co-defendants, leaving what? The legislature to deal with this problem, as it should, because legal defense fund requires 3 things. Someone has to determine, in order for your money to be used to defend these people for violating their oath, for one of 3 reasons. 1, that they have, in fact, acted within the scope of their delegated powers. 2, that the behavior wasn't reckless. And 3, that it wasn't wanton. And I allege that all of them are indeed the case. And yes, this should be sent to the people for the people to decide, not for our politicians. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Our next speaker writes in depth for the Liberty Bloc, Elliot Axelman.
This historic legislation marks the culmination of 245 years of increasing abuses of our natural rights by the tyrants in Washington, D.C. Regardless of the politicians or party in power, these abuses have continued to increase. In 1776, the people of New Hampshire seceded from the British Empire because they could no longer bear the abuses of the tyrannical government. By many measures, The actions of our current federal government are far more tyrannical than those of the government we seceded from back in 1776. To those who claim that the Civil War settled this issue, we ask, if might makes right, if fear of violent retribution keeps one in an abusive relationship, is that a reason to stay or more of a reason to separate? If you are tired of being forced to pay for perpetual wars in faraway places, history has shown us that the federal government has no real desire to end unnecessary military operations across the globe. If you are sick of the failed war on drugs, civil asset forfeiture, illegal warrantless immigration and sobriety checkpoints, you should support independence for New Hampshire. Those and many more violations of liberty have roots in D.C. Insanity could be defined as doing the same thing repeatedly and expecting a different result. We have been peaceful, patient, hardworking citizens and obedient serfs to D.C. for 245 years. We have exhausted every method of reforming the federal government imaginable. Our overlords in D.C. have continued to increase their powers while minimizing our liberties and violating our rights. We have campaigned and voted for the most pro-liberty candidates. We have called and emailed legislators, and we have signed many petitions. We have tried protests and lawsuits. Nothing has worked. With each passing day, we see that the values of New Hampshire citizens are diverging from the values held by those in D.C. and the other states of the Union. The people of California and New York simply have different values than we do. Voters of some states prefer socialism, gun control, mandatory masks and vaccinations, compulsory government education, prohibition of substances, and many more violations of liberty. And that's okay. They are different people with different values. We no longer find that we have more in common with the Union than we do with other nations around the world. Reasonable people would not believe that the people of Ukraine should be forced to live under the exact same set of laws as those in Kenya. Forcing two or more opposing cultures together in perpetuity simply cannot end well. The federal government steals around half of our annual salaries, and through agencies like the NSA, FBI, ATF, EPA, CBP, 400 total agencies, and 4 million total federal agents, uses the money to abuse us, spy on us, and control the economy, costing over $2 trillion in economic damage per year. Many criminal justice issues and much of corona fascism results from federal money and influence. The increasingly disturbing surveillance and police state stem primarily from D.C. These and many other issues would cease to exist if we severed ties with D.C. and governed ourselves. The people of New Hampshire, innocent, peaceful, hardworking patriots, have not had the opportunity to vote on their relationship with D.C. politicians since a few delegates decided to join the Union 240 years ago, with the understanding that the federal government would always protect our natural rights and never violate the Constitution. How well has that worked out? Never in our lifetime have we had the chance to even make our voice heard on the question of whether to govern ourselves. If you do not yet believe that we should give up on saving the Union and fixing D.C., how much more freedom must we lose before you are convinced that we cannot shrink the federal government back to its original size and that the only option is leaving and governing ourselves? A vote for CACR 32, no matter which side of independence you stand on, is a vote to trust the citizens of this great state with their own future. A vote against CACR 32 expresses the belief that only a small group of people in Washington, D.C. should control the lives of everyone in this state and all of our descendants. Thank you.
Thank you, Elliot. While the people reserve to themselves the right to revolution in Part 1st, Article 10, we are here today to head off any consideration of anything but a peaceful formation of a new government independent of rule from Washington, D.C. Today, we will ask our legislature to allow the people of New Hampshire to express their desire by putting the question on the ballot this November. Thank you for coming, and we'll take a couple of questions before the hearing. Any questions? Oh.
What does healthcare look like if we secede and we are our own nation?
I'm sorry, I'm old and hard of hearing.
What does healthcare look like if we secede I mean, I'm for it, but I was just curious on,
Currently, we see healthcare under attack. Obamacare is beginning to look a bit like Building 7. I don't know what our healthcare system will look like. We have a lot of people now, doctors and nurses, who are refusing medical treatments, who are going independent. Those will be the first line of the new healthcare system in the new state of New Hampshire.
How do you plan on paying for roads that are federally funded?
Oh, the roads. We'll pay for it with Bitcoin mining.
How do you think the cotton will be picked when slavery ends?
As we know, cotton picking did not make the South poor back in the 1800s. It did not make them rich, I'm sorry. We saw thriving states to the north, and cotton picking business was not exactly a thriving industry.
What happens if it doesn't go through? Will there be another opportunity to put a bill through similar?
If this bill does not get to the people, we can always come back. We have a nice crowd here today. I think this sends the message that the people want to have the question put on the ballot, and we'll see what real, true support looks like.
When this goes in front of the full state house, will we be able to get a roll call vote?
Absolutely, yeah. Because they have to have a 2/3 margin to win. I think it's an automatic roll call. All right, we're going to head up for the hearing. Thanks for coming out today.